Captain Sarah Chen had always been different from other pilots. At 28, she was the youngest woman to fly commercial jets for Pacific Airways. Her friends called her fearless, but Sarah knew the truth. She wasn't without fear. She just understood it better than most people. On March 15, 2009, Sarah was scheduled to fly Flight 447 from Los Angeles to Tokyo. It was supposed to be a routine flight, nothing special about it. She had flown this route dozens of times before. The weather reports showed clear skies, and her co-pilot, Michael Torres, someone she trusted completely. That morning, Sarah woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. She almost called in sick but decided against it. Too many people were counting on her, and she had never been one to back down from her responsibilities at the airport. Sarah went through her usual pre-flight routine. She checked every instrument twice, reviewed the weather reports again, and spoke with air traffic control. Everything seemed normal. Yet that uncomfortable feeling in her stomach wouldn't go away. The passengers began boarding at 2:30 p.m. Sarah watched them through the cockpit window, families going on vacation, business travelers heading to important meetings, young couples starting their adventures together. She felt responsible for every single one of them. Flight 447 took off at exactly 3:15 p.m. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. Sarah and Michael chatted about their families, the weather, and upcoming vacation plans. The plane flew smoothly through the afternoon sky. The passengers seemed relaxed. But at 4:20 p.m., something changed. The radar screens and air traffic control centers across 3 countries showed something impossible. Flight 447 simply disappeared. One moment it was there, flying at 35,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean. The next moment, it was gone. The emergency response was immediate. Coast Guard ships rushed to the plane's last known location. Military jets scrambled to search the area. Satellite images were reviewed frame by frame. But there was no wreckage, no oil slick, no debris floating in the water. It was as if Flight 447 had simply vanished into thin air. Sarah's husband, David, was at their home in San Diego when he got the phone call. He was playing with their 5-year-old daughter, Emma, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was from Pacific Airways, and the words didn't make sense at first. "Missing?" David repeated. "What do you mean missing?" The search continued for weeks. Sarah's face appeared on news channels around the world. Her story became one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Experts offered theories: equipment failure, sudden weather changes, even terrorist attacks. But none of them could explain why no trace of the plane was ever found. Emma kept asking when her mommy was coming home. David didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes people just disappear? As months turned into years, the official search was called off. The case remained open, but hope began to fade. David eventually remarried, though he never stopped loving Sarah. Emma grew up with only faint memories of her real mother, but Sarah's story was far from over. What happened to Flight 447 that day would remain a secret for 15 long years. The truth was more incredible than anyone could have imagined. And Sarah's return would come at a time when her country needed her most. The world had moved on, but somewhere out there, Sarah Chen was still alive, still fighting, and still protecting the people she had sworn to serve. The other side, when Sarah opened her eyes, she wasn't in her cockpit anymore. She was lying on what felt like grass, but it glowed with a soft blue light. The sky above her was neither day nor night, but something in between, like eternal twilight. Michael was beside her, unconscious but breathing. Around them, other people were slowly waking up. Sarah recognized them as her passengers, but they all looked confused and frightened. The strangest part was that everyone appeared exactly as they had on the plane. No injuries, no signs of a crash. "Where are we?" asked Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who had been traveling to visit her grandchildren in Tokyo. Her voice echoed strangely. In the quiet air, Sarah stood up and looked around. They were in a place that defied explanation. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, covered in that strange glowing grass. In the distance, she could see structures that looked like buildings. But their architecture was unlike anything she had ever seen. A figure approached them from one of these structures. It looked human, but there was something different about the way it moved. Too graceful, too fluid. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome," it said. "You have crossed over during a moment of temporal disruption. This is a place between worlds, between times." The passengers gathered around Sarah, looking to her for leadership. She had been their captain in the air. And somehow that responsibility had followed her to this strange place. "We need to get back," Sarah said firmly. "These people have families waiting for them." The being nodded as if it had expected this response. "Time works differently here. What feels like days to you will be years in your world. But there is a way to return, though it comes with a price." Over the following days, or what felt like days, Sarah learned about this place between worlds. The beings who lived there were ancient, older than human civilization. They had been watching Earth for thousands of years, sometimes intervening when great disasters threatened to change the course of history. "Your world is heading toward a crisis," one of them explained to Sarah. 15 years from your time. A series of events will unfold that could destroy millions of lives. We cannot intervene directly, but someone from your world could make a difference. Sarah learned to navigate this strange realm. The passengers had formed a small community, and she had become their unofficial leader. Some wanted to find a way home immediately, while others began to accept their situation. But Sarah never stopped looking for a way back. The beings taught her things that no human had ever known. She learned about time, about the connections between all living things, about forces that existed beyond the physical world. Most importantly, she learned about the coming crisis in 2024. A combination of natural disasters and human conflicts would create a perfect storm. A massive earthquake would damage nuclear facilities on the West Coast. At the same time, international tensions would reach a breaking point, threatening to escalate into global war. Millions of people would be in danger, including her own daughter. "Why me?" Sarah asked. "Why can't you stop this yourselves?" "Because the solution must come from within your world," they replied. "Someone with the knowledge we can give you, but also with the heart of a human being. Someone willing to sacrifice everything to save others." As the years passed in the real world, Sarah watched through special viewing portals. She saw David remarrying a kind woman named Lisa. She watched Emma grow up, graduate from high school and start college. She saw her daughter struggle with the loss of a mother she barely remembered. The hardest part was knowing that Emma needed her. But being unable to reach out, Sarah could only watch as her daughter faced the challenges of growing up without her real mother. There were times when Sarah wanted to give up, to accept that she would never return home. But the beings reminded her of what was coming. They showed her visions of the destruction that awaited. She saw cities in ruins, families torn apart, her own daughter among those who would suffer if the crisis wasn't prevented. Sarah made her choice. She would learn everything they could teach her. She would prepare for the day when she could return and use that knowledge to save her world. Even if it meant sacrificing any chance of reclaiming her old life, she would do whatever it took to protect the people she loved. The return March 15th, 2024, exactly 15 years after Flight 447 disappeared. Something impossible happened at Los Angeles International Airport. Air traffic controller Janet Walsh was working the night shift when her screen showed something that made her question her own sanity. A blip appeared on the radar, an aircraft approaching from the west, over the Pacific Ocean. But according to the flight data, it was Flight 447. "This has to be a system error," Janet muttered, checking her equipment. But the signal was clear and strong. She tried to make radio contact. "Flight 447, this is Lax Tower. Please respond." For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, clear, calm, and unmistakably professional. "Lax Tower, this is Captain Sarah Chen. Flight 447, requesting emergency landing clearance." Janet's hands started shaking. She had been working air traffic control for 20 years, and she knew the story of Flight 447. Everyone in aviation knew that story. "Flight 447, please confirm your identity and current position," This is Captain Sarah Chen. ID number 4471 SC. We are approaching from the west at 15,000 feet. We have 287 passengers and crew on board, and we need to land immediately. Janet called her supervisor, who called his supervisor, who called the airport director. Within minutes, emergency vehicles were racing toward the runway. News crews, somehow alerted to the situation, began arriving at the airport at 11:47 p.m. Flight 447 touched down on runway 2 for L. The plane looked exactly as it had 15 years ago. No signs of wear, no damage. As if it had been flying for only a few hours instead of being lost for 15 years. Sarah emerged from the cockpit, looking exactly as she had on the day she disappeared. Not a day older, not a hair out of place. Behind her came Michael and all 287 passengers. None of whom seemed to have aged a single day. The passengers were confused and disoriented. To them, it felt like they had been gone for only a few weeks. They had no memory of the place between worlds that was Sarah's burden to carry alone. David got the call at 12:30 a.m. He was at his home in San Diego with his wife Lisa and their 2 children. When he heard Sarah's name, he thought it was some kind of cruel joke. "David, it's really me," Sarah's voice said over the phone. "I know this is impossible to understand, but I'm back. I'm at LAX, and I need to see you and Emma." David sat down heavily in his kitchen chair. Lisa came downstairs, concerned by the late phone call. When he explained what was happening, she didn't believe him either. But Emma, now 20 years old and a college student at UCLA, saw the news reports first. She called her father, crying and laughing at the same time. "Dad, it's her. It's really her. Mom is back." The reunion was both joyful and heartbreaking. Emma had grown from a 5-year-old into a beautiful young woman. David had built a new life with Lisa and their children. Sarah realized that while she had been preparing to save the world had moved on without her. But there was no time for long explanations or emotional processing. Sarah knew exactly why she had been allowed to return, and she knew time was running out. "David, I need you to listen to me carefully," she said, as they sat in a conference room at LAX. "In 3 days, there's going to be a major earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. It's going to damage the Diablo Canyon power plant at the same time. There's going to be an international incident that could trigger a larger conflict." David looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Sarah, you've been gone for 15 years? Maybe you should see a doctor. Talk to someone. ... I know how this sounds," Sarah said urgently. "But I also know that in exactly 72 hours, Emma and millions of other people are going to be in terrible danger. I've been preparing for this moment for 15 years, and I'm the only one who can stop it." Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Mom, even if what you're saying is true, what can you do? You're just one person." Sarah looked at her daughter, the little girl she had left behind, now grown into a strong, intelligent woman. "Sometimes one person is enough," she said softly. "Sometimes one person who knows the right thing to do at the right moment can change everything." She stood up and gathered the files she had been carrying. "I have to go. There are people I need to contact, preparations I need to make, but I want you both to know that everything I'm about to do, I'm doing to protect the people I love." As Sarah walked toward the door, Emma called out to her, "Mom, will I see you again?" Sarah turned back, and for the first time since her return, she looked uncertain. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The warning Sarah had 48 hours to prevent a disaster that could kill millions of people. The knowledge she had gained in the place between worlds was incredible. But convincing people to believe her was another challenge entirely. Her first stop was the United States. Geological Survey Office in Pasadena. Dr. Robert Martinez, the chief seismologist, agreed to meet with her only because of the media attention surrounding her mysterious return. "Dr. Martinez, I need you to look at the fault line activity near Diablo Canyon," Sarah said, spreading detailed charts across his desk. "On March 18th, at approximately 3:47 a.m., there's going to be a 7.2 magnitude earthquake centered 12 miles northeast of the power plant. Dr. Martinez looked at the charts with growing amazement. The data was incredibly detailed, showing stress patterns and geological formations that his own instruments hadn't detected. "Where did you get this information?" he asked. "These readings are more accurate than anything our most advanced equipment could produce." "That doesn't matter right now," Sarah said urgently. "What matters is that you have 36 hours to convince the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to shut down the reactor and evacuate the surrounding area." Dr. Martinez shook his head. "Even if your data is accurate, do you have any idea what you're asking? Shutting down a nuclear plant costs millions of dollars. Evacuating thousands of people requires government approval at the highest levels. They'll want proof, not just charts from a woman who claims to have been missing for 15 years. But as Dr. Martinez studied the data more carefully, he began to see patterns that matched recent seismic activity in the region. Against his better judgment, he found himself believing her. Meanwhile, Sarah's second mission was even more challenging. She needed to reach someone in the intelligence community who could prevent an international crisis that was supposed to unfold simultaneously with the earthquake. Through contacts she had developed during her years as a commercial pilot, Sarah managed to get a meeting with Agent Rebecca Stone from the Department of Homeland Security. Agent Stone was skeptical, but agreed to listen. "There's going to be an incident involving a cargo ship in Long Beach Harbor," Sarah explained. "The ship is carrying materials that will be mistakenly identified as weapons components. When the earthquake hits and communication systems are disrupted, this misidentification will trigger a series of diplomatic escalations." Agent Stone leaned forward. "You're talking about specific intelligence that would be classified at the highest levels. How could you possibly know about this?" Sarah had prepared for this question. "Agent Stone, I know this sounds impossible, but I need you to check the cargo manifest for the MV Solbright, arriving at Long Beach tomorrow evening. Container HLBU 44717. Contains industrial equipment that will register as suspicious on your scanners due to a labeling error, even if what you're saying is true," Agent Stone said. "Why would this cause an international incident?" "Because when the earthquake hits, the automated security systems will go into lockdown mode. The container will be flagged as a potential threat at the exact moment when government officials are dealing with the nuclear emergency. In the chaos and confusion, certain foreign intelligence services will interpret this as a coordinated attack." Sarah showed Agent Stone a timeline of events detailed down to the minute. Within 6 hours of the earthquake, 3 different countries will begin military mobilizations. Within 12 hours, we'll be on the brink of a conflict that could escalate globally. Agent Stone studied the documents. "This level of detail, ... It's like you have access to classified information from multiple agencies, multiple countries. That should be impossible." "What should be impossible," Sarah said quietly, "is for me to be sitting here talking to you right now. But here I am. I'm telling you that millions of lives depend on what happens in the next 24 hours. Back at Diablo Canyon, plant manager Thomas Brennan was facing the most difficult decision of his career. Dr. Martinez had contacted him with Sarah's earthquake prediction, and his own seismic team was beginning to detect unusual activity. "Tom, I've been monitoring earthquakes for 20 years, Dr. Martinez said over the phone. "I've never seen data this precise or this convincing. If this woman is right, and we don't act, we could be looking at another Chernobyl." Thomas looked out at the power plant that provided electricity to millions of California homes. Shutting it down without proper authorization could end his career. But if the prediction was accurate, not shutting it down could end thousands of lives. Emma couldn't focus on her college classes. She kept thinking about her mother's words, about the certainty in her voice when she talked about the coming disaster. That evening, she drove to LAX. Hoping to find Sarah, she found her mother in an airport hotel, surrounded by maps, computer printouts, and phone logs. Sarah looked exhausted, as if she had been working without sleep for days. "Mom, you look terrible," Emma said softly. Sarah looked up and managed a tired smile. "I feel terrible. But I'm running out of time, and there are still people who need to be warned." "What if you're wrong?" Emma asked. "What if nothing happens?" Sarah considered the question. then I'll have caused a lot of trouble for nothing. People will think I'm crazy, and I'll probably spend the rest of my life in some kind of government facility being studied like a lab rat. And if you're right, Sarah's expression grew serious. If I'm right, then tomorrow morning, millions of people will be safe because we acted in time. Including you. Emma sat down beside her mother. What can I do to help? For the first time in days, Sarah's face lit up with genuine hope. Actually, there is something. I need someone to coordinate the evacuation routes while I'm dealing with the government agencies. Someone I trust completely. As mother and daughter worked through the night, neither of them knew that in less than 18 hours, Sarah's predictions would begin to come true. The crisis, March 18th, 2024. 3:47 a.m., the earth began to shake. Sarah was in the emergency command center at Diablo Canyon when the first tremors hit. Thanks to her warnings, the nuclear reactor had been shut down 6 hours earlier. Despite protests from corporate executives and government officials who thought the precaution was unnecessary, the earthquake was exactly as powerful as she had predicted. Buildings swayed, roads cracked, and power lines snapped across central California. But because of the preparation Sarah had insisted upon, the nuclear plant remained stable and secure. "My God," whispered Thomas Brennan, the plant manager, as he watched the seismic readings. If the reactor had been operational, thousands of people would be dead or dying right now, Sarah finished grimly. But we're not done yet. The international crisis is about to begin. At Long Beach Harbor. The earthquake had triggered automatic security protocols exactly as Sarah had predicted. The MV Solbright was locked down and container was flagged by scanning systems as containing suspicious materials. Agent Rebecca Stone was coordinating with multiple agencies from a command center in downtown Los Angeles. The earthquake had damaged communication systems throughout the region. It's making it difficult to verify information or coordinate responses. Agent Stone. "We have a problem," reported one of her analysts. "The container we flagged yesterday is showing positive readings for materials that could be used in weapons manufacturing." "That's impossible," Agent Stone said, remembering her conversation with Sarah. "Run the scan again, and check the shipping manifests for labeling errors." But in the chaos following the earthquake, protocols were being followed automatically. Security alerts were being transmitted to intelligence agencies around the world, and those agencies were beginning to draw their own conclusions about what was happening. Emma was at a Red Cross evacuation center in San Luis Obispo, helping coordinate relief efforts for people displaced by the earthquake. She had been working alongside her mother for the past 18 hours, and she was amazed by Sarah's ability to anticipate problems before they occurred. "Mom, how do you know where to send the medical teams?" Emma asked as Sarah directed ambulances to locations where victims hadn't even been reported yet. "I've seen this all play out before," Sarah said sadly. "In the place where I was, they showed me what would happen if no one intervened. I watched people die who didn't have to die. At 10:15 a.m., the international situation began to escalate exactly as Sarah had warned. Intelligence agencies in 3 different countries interpreted the container incident as part of a coordinated attack timed with the earthquake. Sarah was on the phone with Agent Stone when the first reports came in. "It's starting," Sarah said urgently. "You need to get someone to the Long Beach facility right now. The container needs to be properly identified before the situation gets worse." "I've got teams on the way," Agent Stone replied. "But Sarah, there are already reports of military movements in the Pacific. How did you know this would happen?" Sarah closed her eyes. "This was the hardest part to explain. Because I've been watching and waiting for 15 years, knowing that this day would come. Everything I learned, everything I sacrificed, it was all for this moment." By noon, the crisis was in full swing. 3 countries had placed their military forces on high alert. Diplomatic channels were buzzing with accusations and demands for explanations. The earthquake damage had made it difficult for American officials to provide clear information. And the confusion was being interpreted as deception, but Sarah was ready for this too. Using knowledge she had gained in the place between worlds, she helped coordinate a series of carefully timed communications that began to diffuse the international tensions. Agent Stone. You need to contact Admiral Chen with the Pacific Fleet, Sarah said, handing over a sealed envelope. This contains information that will prove the container incident was accidental, not deliberate. How do you have classified naval intelligence? Agent Stone demanded. Because I've been preparing for this crisis for 15 years, Sarah replied. Everything that's happening today, I've seen it all before. The earthquake, the container incident, the military escalations. It's all connected, and it all had to be prevented at exactly the right moment. At 2:30 p.m., Thomas Brennan received confirmation that the Diablo Canyon power plant had suffered no damage despite the earthquake's power. The decision to shut down the reactor had prevented a nuclear disaster that could have contaminated thousands of square miles. At 4:15 p.m., Agent Stone's team confirmed that container HLBU 447-127 contained industrial drilling equipment, not weapons components. The labeling error that had triggered international alerts was corrected, and diplomatic communications began to calm the escalating crisis. By evening, the immediate dangers had passed. The earthquake had caused significant damage and several dozen casualties, but nothing compared to what would have happened without Sarah's intervention. The nuclear disaster had been prevented, and the international crisis had been resolved before it could escalate into armed conflict. Emma found her mother sitting alone on a bench outside the evacuation center, looking exhausted but relieved. You did it, Emma said softly. You saved all those people. Sarah nodded slowly. But the hardest part is still coming. What do you mean? Sarah looked at her daughter with eyes that held both love and sorrow. The beings who allowed me to return. They made it clear that this was a one-time intervention. Now that the crisis has passed, I have to make a choice. Emma felt her heart sink. What kind of choice? I can stay here, in this world, with the people I love, Sarah said quietly. But if I do, the knowledge I gained, the connection to that other place, it will all fade away. I'll become just another person who can't prevent the next crisis. Or, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, or I can return to that place between worlds and continue to watch and protect, but I'll have to leave you again. And this time, it will be forever. The choice Sarah had 24 hours to make the most difficult decision of her life. The beings from the place between worlds had been clear. She could stay in her world and live as a normal person. Or she could return to continue protecting humanity from future crises. But she couldn't do both. David came to see her at the hotel where she was staying. The past few days had been overwhelming for everyone, but especially for him. His wife of 15 years had returned, looking exactly as she had when she disappeared, while he had aged and built a new life. Sarah, I need to know what you're thinking, he said, as they sat in the hotel restaurant. The whole world is calling you a hero, but you look like you're preparing to say goodbye again. Sarah stirred her coffee absently. David, you've moved on. You have a beautiful family with Lisa. The children love you. And she's been a wonderful mother to Emma. I can't just walk back into that life and pretend nothing has changed. But you could try, David said desperately. We could figure it out. Emma needs her mother, and despite everything that's happened, I still love you. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. I know you do, and I love you too. But the person you fell in love with was just a pilot who wanted to fly planes and come home to her family every night. I'm not that person anymore. That afternoon, Emma came to spend time with her mother. They walked along the beach in Santa Monica, talking about the years they had lost and the uncertain future ahead of them. Mom, I've been thinking about what you told me, Emma said as they sat on the sand watching the sunset. About the choice you have to make. And Emma was quiet for a moment. When I was little, after you disappeared, I used to pretend that you were somewhere far away, fighting monsters to keep me safe. I know it sounds silly, but it helped me deal with the fact that you weren't coming home. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. That doesn't sound silly at all. The thing is, Emma continued, now I know I wasn't wrong. You really were somewhere far away, protecting people. And if that's who you are, if that's what you're meant to do, then maybe I can be okay with that, Emma. You're my daughter. I should be here for you. I should have been here for your graduation, your first heartbreak, all the moments I missed. Emma turned to look at her mother. But how many other daughters did you save yesterday? How many other mothers and fathers and children are alive because you made the choice to sacrifice your own happiness? That evening, Sarah met with Agent Stone one last time. The government wanted to debrief her extensively to understand how she had known about the crisis and prevented it. The truth is, Agent Stone, even if I told you everything, you wouldn't be able to prevent the next crisis without help from the same source that helped me, Sarah explained. But there will be other crises, other moments when someone needs to have impossible knowledge at exactly the right time. Are you saying this will happen again? I'm saying that someone needs to be watching always. Someone needs to be ready to intervene when the worst disasters threaten to unfold. Agent Stone studied Sarah's face. You're going back, aren't you? To wherever you were for those 15 years? Sarah nodded slowly. It's the only way to make sure yesterday's crisis was worth preventing. On the morning of March 20th, Sarah stood at Lax with her family around her. Emma was there, along with David, Lisa, and their children. Even Michael Torres, her co-pilot who had returned with her, came to say goodbye. I want you all to know, Sarah said, looking at each of them, that every moment I spent away, every sacrifice I made, it was all worth it because of the people I love. You are the reason I had the strength to do what needed to be done. Emma hugged her mother tightly. Will we ever see you again? I don't know, Sarah said honestly, but I promise you this. Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I'll be watching over you. All of you. At exactly noon, Sarah walked alone toward a section of the airport that had been cordoned off. To observers, she simply seemed to fade away, becoming transparent until she disappeared entirely. But for those who knew where to look, who understood the connections between worlds, Sarah Chen continued her watch. From the place between worlds, she monitored threats that hadn't yet emerged, crises that wouldn't unfold for years or decades. Emma returned to college, but she changed her major to emergency management. She wanted to help people the way her mother had, even if she could only work within the normal world. David kept Sarah's picture on his desk and told his children stories about the hero who was their stepmother. Lisa understood and supported him, knowing that some loves transcend the boundaries of time and space. Agent Stone established a new division within security, dedicated to monitoring unusual threats and anomalous intelligence reports. She never forgot the woman who had prevented a global catastrophe with impossible knowledge and perfect timing. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the world seemed particularly fragile, air traffic controllers would report strange blips on their radar, aircraft that appeared briefly and then vanished, as if someone was still out there, still watching, still protecting the people below. Sarah Chen had made her choice. She had chosen duty over happiness, service over personal fulfillment, but in making that choice, she had also chosen to love in the most profound way possible, by sacrificing everything to keep others safe. Her story became legend among those who knew the truth. A reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love require the greatest acts of sacrifice. And somewhere in the place between worlds, Sarah continued her eternal watch, ready to return whenever her world needed her most.